Buongiorno a tutti. Chiedo di
Good morning, everybody. Please take your seats. Welcome to all of you to our 2024 edition of the Jewelry Technology Forum, which for 20 years now has been a unique training appointment where operators of the jewelry sector, the academic world, research institutes, and experts in the field get together to share information and to be updated on research, technology, design, market trends, and laws. A piece of jewelry, it is not just a product of the jewel industry, but it is also the result of a complex production process, starting from the investigation of social trends, going through taste, credibility of designers, creativity of designers, and leads to a concrete object thanks to applied technology. JTF is an idea of Legor Group, a producer of alloys and other products for the jewelry industry, which has always been committed to promoting the scientific culture of this industry in cooperation with the Vicenza Fair. JTF is inspired by the Santa Fe Symposium that for many years has been the reference for the jewelry industry worldwide. I would like to ask Dr. Farsura, Exhibition Manager of IEG, to join me on the podium for a few greeting words. Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. On behalf of Italian Exhibition Group, I would like to welcome you here. This is the third day of our fair, and we're very, very happy of the results obtained in the first 2 days in terms of visitors, both in terms of quantity, but especially in terms of quality of our visitors. You can see our logo here on the slide. This is a theme of this year's edition. Vicenza is celebrating its 70th anniversary. This is a target that we want to celebrate together with exhibitors who've been with us for 70 years and hopefully will be with us in the future as well. Another fundamental point of our edition is a confirmation of the requalification works that will give us the opportunity in 2026 to host in the Vicenza headquarters the technological area, which has a huge potential for growth. Together with T-Gold, Vicenza Oro is a business platform as well as a platform for relations and training and education. JTF has been in our calendar for many, many years now, and I would like to thank Massimo Poliero, Legor, and all their staff for the quality of the contents that are debated here in our platform. So thank you very much and enjoy your meeting. I would like to invite Massimo Poliero to take the floor. Good morning, everybody. JTF is celebrating its 19th anniversary, so we are putting up some wrinkles after all these years. It is a pleasure to continue along this path, which certainly is to the advantage of the jewelry industry. Training, sharing are fundamental for the growth of our industry. This is why we trust that this trend is going to continue. Tomorrow morning at 10, there will be a very interesting presentation about the future of technology. I would like to thank, first of all, the Italian Exhibition Group for supporting us throughout the years. I would like to thank Mr. Marco Carniello and Matteo Frasura, a reference point for us. The fact that the Italian Exhibition Group firmly believes that technology is an element of excellence worldwide, especially the Italian technology, The fact that they go on investing in this industry makes us look at the future with optimism, since we are a worldwide excellence in the production of machinery and technology. I would like to thank Andrea Friso, Andrea Basso, the staff of Leger, and all the employees who have made this JTF possible. I could go on. Thanking Dibel, the founder of the Santa Fe Symposium, to whom I spoke a few days ago and who would like to greet you all. I would like to thank Chris Corti, who's here with us after so many years, together with many friends. Linus, Jörg. Friends have been with us for years, who come to bring us knowledge. And it is a pleasure for us to go on doing this. So thank you very much, because whatever we do, the quality, the excellence of what we do is based on relations, on the passion that we pour into what we do. And relationships that can support this industry are a huge advantage for us. I hope I didn't forget anybody, and I apologize straight away. So I would like to thank the scientific committee, and please do not forget to come here tomorrow at 10 to present another important event that will start in September 2025. Thank you. Thank you very much, Matteo Farsura. Thank you very much, Massimo Poliero. Right, let's start with our program. Let's officially open our 2024 edition of Jewelry Technology Forum with the first presentation. But before starting, I would like to remind you that you have received a file containing an abstract of the presentations, as well as forms for your demands, for your questions. Because at the end of the meeting this morning we will listen to 5 presentations. We will have a Q&A session. So please do write your questions in the forms. You can give me the forms. I will give them to the speakers so that they can prepare an adequate answer to your question. At the end of the session, we will all enjoy a light lunch, which will be served just outside. Right, let's start with the first presentation by Mrs. Daniela Corsini with the title Precious Metals Amid Monetary Policies and Geopolitical Risks. Mrs. Corsini got her degree cum laude in Economic Statistics and Social Sciences at the Bocconi University in Milan. She started her career in 2006 at Horizon Capital in Luxembourg, managing a portfolio focused on equity funds in emerging markets. In 2011, she started working with Intesa Sanpaolo as a member of the research department, where she manages macroeconomic research for raw material markets, specializing in energy, agriculture, industry, and precious metals. Since 2011, she's been a member of the CFA Institute. Her presentation will take us through the factors that affect the quotation of precious metals in the global context, trying to envisage the scenario for 2024.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your kind invitation and thank you for being here. We're now going to look at the factors that guide the sales in precious metals. I'm going to spend a few words now to share with you the vision of the Direction of Studies and Research of Intesa Sanpaolo over the next years. In 2024, we expect quite a slowing down of economy with a take-up of economy with a recovery in 2025. Growth is going to be led by emerging countries, especially so China and India, where the weakest elements are going to be found in Europe. So the growth in Europe is going to be slower than in other geographic areas. Now we expect a slowing down from 2.7 that was recorded in 2023 to 2.3 that has expected for 2024, with a further recovery and acceleration to in 2025. The good news for Italy is that once again, for the fourth year on end, Italy is going to grow more than the rest of Europe with a growth of 0.7 in 2024 and 1.2 in 2025. What are the most important drivers of growth? First and foremost is the growth of purchasing power of households and the National Plan for Recovery. We're going to see a drop in inflation, which is something that is going to be marking the forthcoming quarters. There's going to be a recovery in the pickup of the salaries. This is what expected, thanks to the collective bargaining. Now, with reference to investments with the Italian National Plan for Recovery and Resilience, we believe that there could be some delays in the implementation of the investments under the implementation of the plan itself. In Europe, household consumption and business investments are going to be the driving engines of the recovery. In these charts that have been drafted by my colleagues, you see that on the left-hand side, for example, there has been a pickup in the expenditure for interest rates by the Italian households. But this is lower than in the restrictive cycles that we have experienced in the past. And this is due to two things. On the one hand, we've had many years of low interest rates, if not even negative interest rates, so much so that there's been fixed interest rate indebtedness for Italian households. And so both families and businesses have not suffered much because of the pickup of interest rates, because they were paying fixed interest rates, which is a good thing. And it contributes to the purchasing power remaining unchanged. The second reason is that the drop in net indebtedness of households and businesses. On the right-hand side, you see that both households and businesses have reduced their indebtedness. So these are two strengths that combined together are going to make sure that the real salary is going to be unchanged, so that there's still going to be money available to be spent, and this obviously is going to promote also the expenditure in the jewelry sector. Now, with reference to inflation, we are going to expect a drop in inflation. We believe we're going to get to 2% of interest rate, which is the target of the European Central Bank. By 2025, we're going to see a high degree of volatility when it comes to the headline inflation, which is connected to energy and food products, because of the problems that the energy system is still experiencing. And the fact that oil has to be shipped through the Red Sea is still an issue, and this can perhaps also cause a pickup of inflation because of delays in the shipment of oil. Now, with reference to the reaction of the central banks, well, the market expectation is that you see a cut of inflation in the very short term. As you see on the left-hand side, the market is expecting an early reduction of a rate in March and April. And the market is expecting a further cut at every successive meeting of the central banks. We expect that the market is wrong in a way, because central banks are certainly going to be much more cautious in easing monetary policies. So our research studies center is not expecting any drop in the first quarter. We believe it is only in July and September that we're going to see some drop in interest rates. So we're going to have a much limited lowering of interest rates. So we only believe that we're going to expect a 50 or 75 basis point reduction. This entails that the market perhaps is too optimistic on the one hand, so much so that the financial market is going to be extremely volatile and tense, because whenever central banks are going to have a meeting, the market is going to be expecting a reduction in the rates, which is not going to be met. This means that both for gold and dollar, we can expect a high degree of volatility, especially at the beginning of the year, before the cuts in the interest rates are actually implemented. As you see, the relationship between gold and dollar has been very strong in a negative sense. And when it comes to gold, the macro scenario has been a main driving force, because the gold value has been dropping and coming up when the interest rates were picking up, or when the geopolitical tensions were such that more people were seeking refuge assets such as gold is. So now gold is paid over $2,000 per ounces, because there is an expectation that the interest rates are going to be reduced, and that is going to have a positive repercussion on gold prices. But geopolitical risks lead to disinflation, because again of the problems of shipping oil through the Red Sea, so much so that gold is going to be supported for the next few months. Let's have a look now at the gold consumption data worldwide. I'm sure that you're very well familiar with such data that are disseminated by World Gold Council. At the beginning, there are negative data. We have a reduction year on year vis-a-vis the third quarter of 2022, but in the third quarter of 2022, we saw the best quarter ever when it comes to gold consumption, whereas the latest third quarter has been the best third quarter ever, much higher than in the 5-year average. The 5-year average, if continued, would lead us to gold consumption growing by 8%, and the consumption in the jewelry industry grew by 5%. There is also a strong demand of gold by the central bank. They're going to be the net buyers, because they want to safeguard strategic reserves from geopolitical tensions and tensions as imposed by the US against specific countries. So there's a strong will to have important deposits in the central bank. This is going to drive gold price even higher, especially so over the next few quarters. So vis-a-vis the past, we're going to expect a lower degree of volatility in gold price. As to our forecast, in 2024, we expect an average price of $2,050 per ounces, with a slight drop and a further peak up in 2025, leading to $2,075 per ounces in 2026, with a forecast for further growth in the next few years. Prices are going to be very similar to the ones that we're experiencing now, because there are macroeconomic risks, inflation risks, and geopolitical risks combined together that are going to stop a drop in the price, despite the recovery that we expect from 2025. And the risk for increase in the price are going to be contained by the macro scenario, which is extremely tense and complicated and volatile. Now, as for silver, we expect an overperformance of silver vis-a-vis gold, with a price of silver which is going to vary more than with gold. Also because of the investments that have been made with solar energy investments, we're going to have a growing demand for silver, so we believe that the price is going to pick up. As for platinum, We expect that in 2024, the short term, the prices are not going to be very importantly, but we're going to see an increase in the prices over the next few years, drafted by energy transition and by investment in nitrogen. As for palladium, we expect prices that are going to be similar to the one that we are seeing today in the next few years, but we believe that there's going to be a marked volatility. Palladium is going to be extremely sensitive, as was the case to peaks of volatility connected to geopolitical risks concerning Russia. Russia, indeed, being one of the most important producers of palladium. Here you see our price expectations for the most important metals. And we believe that there's going to be perhaps a higher price for all these metals. Gold, for example, is behaving very similarly to the American interest rates. We know that there is a negative correlation between gold and American interest rates, and this was the case in the past. But when there's an increase in interest rates was expected, the gold would not drop. But where there was an expectation in the cut of the interest rate, gold was reducing more, and this is going to remain unchanged in 2024, so there's going to be a further pickup of price in gold. Thank you. Thank you, Daniela Corsini. I'd like to introduce Mrs. Sara Giusti, who's going to talk about the challenges for the gold industry in the macroeconomic scenario. Sara Giusti got her degree in economics at the Catania University in Varese. She's an economist at the Industry Research Office of Intesa Sanpaolo. She deals with research concerning industrial economy, in particular in the industries connected to fashion and in the geographical regions of Tuscany and Umbria. Mrs. Giusti is going to shed some light on the trend in the gold industry in Italy, with a specific focus on international markets. We're going to see the results of the research carried out, thanks also to the business community of the gold industry in Italy. Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. Now, before looking at the situation, I'd like to present some structural data to see the role that this industry plays within the larger fashion industry, including textile, clothing, leather, and eyewear. The Italian gold industry includes over 7,000 businesses with over 28,000 headcount, with exports over 10,000 million euro. So there has been a shift from 6% to twice as much as concerns the role that the gold industry plays in the wider picture of the Italian fashion system. The gold industry is led by Italy. Italy is the first exporting country. The latest data did back to 2022, and Italy proved to be the first exporter in Europe. On the right-hand side, you see that the growth rate is quite significant over the last 9 months. Now, as for 2022, you see that Italy ranks 5th in this list, with a market share equal to 10%, which has grown over the past 3 years. US, India, Switzerland, and China doing better than Italy. I think we should focus on Switzerland. Switzerland is a hub for our exporters. So perhaps the figure for Switzerland is heavily impacted by exports coming from Italy. So our 10% perhaps is underestimated. This competition translates into an important capability in generating value. Here you see the trade surplus. The fashion system in 2022 had a trade surplus of some 34 billion euro, 20% of this surplus being generated by the gold industry, with over 7 billion euro of trade surplus. In the first 9 months, the surplus is equal to 5.4 billion, and this shows us something that is happening in this industry, which is a slight slowdown, as you see represented in this chart. This chart tells us about another phenomenon as well, which is the important rebounds effect that the industry has recorded after COVID. This rebound effect has led to a recovery in this industry earlier than in other industries. So we've seen incredible years in 21 and 2022, and the slowdown is perhaps a physiological connected to the geopolitical scenario that we just heard mentioned. So this flattening of the slope can actually be considered as a normal event after the brilliant years. Anyway, the industry is doing better than the general fashion and manufacturing systems or industries. We see that on the right-hand side with the development of production with minus 1.4, which is much better than what has been recorded in the manufacturing system at large and in the fashion industry. As for international markets, we already heard about a global trend being always in the positive, and these are data hard drawn from World Gold Council, and they refer to gold jewels. We see that in the first months of 2023, the world demand has remained unchanged, quantity-wise, with a 0.3% increase. Based on that, the general results of the Italian gold industry are even more noticeable, because Italy has achieved a growth by 1% quantity-wise and 12% value-wise, despite demand remaining unchanged. Unchanged demand yields different results across the countries. We see an important pickup on demand in China and Taiwan and Turkey. China has been growing later on after COVID if compared to what has happened in the euro area, because restrictions have been implemented for a longer time, whereas in Turkey, the gold demand has been considered again as a shelter against high inflation. Another important market for our industry is the US market, and here there's a bit of slowing down of the growth after an important result that has been experienced in the previous 2 years. The business community in Italy has been very smart in detecting these trends. You see that they understood that there was a greater demand in Turkey and in China, and this has led also to an increase in the export towards Switzerland, which is again a logistics hub. Consider that there were flows connected to the metals in the past. Ireland is a specific case. Italy has been able to target their products to the growing markets, thanks to the district marking the Italian gold industry. The district organization is such that there are a high number of companies gathered together in a small territorial and small geographic areas, drawing benefits from advantages that could not be taken advantage of elsewhere. There's a strong relationship, know-how and sharing of the know-how, which is very important. Banca Intesa has identified the 3 important districts: Valenza, Vicenza and Arezzo. These 3 districts basically export 70% of the general export for the country. In these 3 areas, Valencia, Arezzo and Vicenza, have shown important growth, especially so in the first 9 months of 2023. On the right-hand side, you may see the specific features of this district. So we were talking about the specific role played by Ireland as a logistics hub. And you see that there is a close connection with the Valenza district, between Valenza and Ireland. Indeed, Valenza is connected to one important operator that has made the major investments and that is getting stronger and stronger, thus defining again Ireland as a logistics hub. Now, with reference to Turkey, we see that there are a lot of exports from Arezzo to Turkey. Now, apart from the short-term data, we've tried and performed another exercise to have a longer perspective. So we looked at the balance sheet. We looked at some 500 balance sheets between 2008 and 2022 to see to what extent these districts changed after important crises that hit the industry and the economy at large. We're looking at 400 businesses in the districts compared to other 100 in businesses not in the districts. And the ones located in the districts grew importantly, much more than the other ones, strengthening their equity. And this is something that we often see across the manufacturing industry. There is again a growing net equity after a selection of companies, a reduction again of the players, and this could be actually a strength to support competitiveness with important investments in the industry. There's another element which is often identified as a focus of our businesses, and that is lower productivity compared to the ones of other manufacturers. We've summarized productivity measuring the added value per each member of staff. And in a way, the situation seems to be completely unexpected, because in 2008 we had a higher productivity in the non-district areas, but this has been balanced over the years, as you may see. And this is the result of the investments that have been made and of the focus on the high-range production that has been detected in the industry. As was said earlier on, we tried and understand also the sentiment of the business community in the industry. There's a survey that we carry out together with the Club degli Orafi, where we ask the business community members what their expectations are in terms of turnover and investments, where the latest survey has just been concluded in December 2023. And this basically confirms what was said. 2023 has been experienced as a good year. As a matter of fact, there is a growing number of businesses that expect a growing turnover. The expectations for 2024, especially when it comes to super small companies, are marked by the general economic situation. And perhaps even more importantly, you see that entrepreneurs perceive they want to invest to be competitive. So despite the economy slowdown, between January and December, there has been an increase in the number of entrepreneurs wishing to increase their investments. No company at all has expressed the desire to reduce investments. So investments are still high, and we're going to have as high investments in 2024 as well. On the whole, we expected that over a third of the companies is going to see greater investments compared to investments made in 2023. Where are the investments focused? Well, there are changes based on the size and the location of the businesses. Very small companies include also distribution companies, so much so that they're wishing to invest in communication, image, and reorganize the internal demand. Whereas medium to large-size companies that are manufacturers are guided into wanted to invest more in technology, buying up of new equipment, and improving their competitiveness. Now, to close, I'd like to go back to the main difficulties to be tackled, the main challenges to be faced by the companies in the industry. In the survey we carried out in December, identified their worst concern as the worsening of the demand. This is very much consistent with the trend that have been recorded. The list of difficulties changed. In June, the first difficulty was identified as finding workers. But now, things have changed, and greatest attention has been devoted again to the worsening of the demand. And yet, one-third of the interviewees are still identifying the lack of manpower as their greatest difficulty. Gold industry in Italy is pretty unique, and because, again, here the worst competitors are perceived as being Italian by our Italian interviewees, and this has always been so, by the way. Why is that? Because the Italian gold industry is marked by a very high quality in the manufacturing, the craftsmanship in the manufacturing, and the professional skills of manpower. So these are the main features that that characterize all Italian competitors. The greatest challenge now is to carry out or implement ever greater degrees of innovation and technology, safeguarding the craftsmanship that is still the main feature of our gold industry in Italy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Giusti. The next presentation is by Dr. Ulrich Klotz, who got his degree in physical metal engineering at the Stuttgart University with a PhD in science of materials at the TCHD in Zurich, Switzerland. As director of the Department of Metallurgical Physics and Physical Metallurgy on Precious Metals and Metal Chemistry at Schwäbisch in Germany, at FEM. Dr. Klotz will talk about the strategies for the development of new jewelry alloys. What can we learn from other industries? Dr. Klotz will present a study exploring the potential benefits deriving from strategies coming from other industries to improve the development of alloys in the production of jewelry. This interdisciplinary approach aims at accelerating the discovery and the optimization of alloy compositions and to pave the way to sustainable, innovative procedures, providing new ideas for the development of jewelry and watches.
Pleasure to be here again this year, and I welcome you to my talk. I'm going to give an introduction first, and then talk about the typical alloy development approaches that are around. Why is alloy development necessary? I will show you some experimental techniques and some simulation-based techniques that can be used for alloy development. And finally, I will go into a point about digitalization in material science, which is a current trend to treat data from different experiments. Now, First, when we want to develop alloys, we have a wide selection of compositions that we can choose from. There are different types. Solid solution-based alloys are the standard alloys that we are using, but there are also other special alloys like intermetallic or amorphous alloys. I will show some examples. And in this first graph, I'll show you just a calculation based on mathematics. If you want to select alloy developments for an alloy, you have to combine them. And you have to map the properties as a function of composition and temperature. And this is usually plotted in a so-called phase diagram. Now, if you have two elements, you can make one binary phase diagram, just one mixture, gold and silver. If you have three elements, gold, silver, and copper, you have one ternary system, but you have gold and silver, you have gold and copper, and you have silver and copper, so you have three ternary systems. Now, if you look at a typical 5-component system, this is, I don't know if this is working here, this is something we're using, gold, silver, copper, palladium, zinc, a typical selection of elements that we're using in white gold. We see that we already have to know 10 binary systems, 10 ternary systems, and 5 quaternary systems. So this is a huge space, and we don't know this space. So we only know the regions around one corner, let's say the gold-rich corner, the silver-rich corner, the copper-rich corner, the palladium-rich corner, but you're aware that a gold alloy is very different from a copper alloy and from a palladium alloy. So actually, we know very little about the space in between. And so it's actually a no man's land that needs to be explored. And there is a very interesting development going on at the moment, so-called high entropy alloys. This is a special class of alloys where all elements are mixed in a similar range. So 5 elements and every element around 20%. And so this, it was found for steels or other aluminum containing alloys, that such alloys are giving very interesting properties that are different from conventional alloys. So knowing all these systems experimentally is an extremely hard work and very difficult to solve. And therefore, we need some screening approaches, which I will talk about. So let's first start with what we are knowing. We know alloys like these, gold, silver, and copper. We have 75% gold or 58.5% gold for 18 and 14 karat. And we know how the atoms arrange. So we have solid solution-based alloys, and then we have so-called ordering. This means the alloying elements are taking special places, and this gives the hardness in red gold. Now there are other alloys, like these alloys with the pretty colors. They're based on so-called intermetallic phases. They only form at a very special composition, where the atoms take a special arrangement. And we know blue gold and purple gold. And we also know these alloys for many technical applications. Titanium aluminides are used in jet engines. Nickel aluminides are also used for high-temperature superalloys, also in jet engines or turbines. We know nitinol, shape memory alloys, that is used in the medical area and for technical purposes. So we also know some intermetallic precious metal-based alloys. And so there is a wide space that is not yet fully explored for alloys that might be used for jewelry applications. Then here is a little movie. The lower image, maybe you can play this, please. So this is something I presented last year. This is a bulk metallic glass, a platinum-based alloys, which has extremely high elasticity. So you're seeing my colleague Lisa, she's dropping this ball, and it bounces back like a rubber ball. And that's because of the very high elasticity of these alloys, and that is very different from conventional alloys. So these alloys form at very special and specific compositions, and therefore it's also important to find out these compositions. And just by melting alloys after alloy, this is very time-consuming and also money-consuming, so we need screening techniques to find such compositions. Now, let's look at where simulation can help us in alloy development. So first of all, for the material properties, to determine them, simulation techniques are very helpful. And also for high throughput calculations to screen whole composition ranges, wide ranges, with many thousands of alloys. I will show some examples for this. So first of all, why do we want to do alloy development? We want to improve the properties like hardness, scratch resistance. We know in many years ago, nickel was replaced by nickel-free white gold alloys. We know about tarnish-resistant silver alloys or red gold alloys with high color stability. And in general, we want to improve the whiteness of the white gold, the hardness of the alloys. So there are many features that we want to improve with the alloys. And we also have new manufacturing techniques like additive manufacturing. So the alloys that we know might probably not fit perfectly to that process because they were developed for casting, they were developed for cast and wrought alloys, so not necessarily they're fitting also to additive manufacturing. And we want to have exclusive companies like special colors. And finally, there are laws or regulations that prohibit special elements, or we have elements that are mined with unfair conditions, and we want to exclude these elements from our processes. So these are all reasons why we want to do alloy development. And if we want to develop alloys, we have to know their properties. There are many properties that the material can have. We have to know this for the production, like our processes to produce them, but also our process to make sheet, to make wire, and so on. And we also need it as input parameters for simulation. And what parameters are around? We all know the mechanical parameters. They are quite easy to determine: tensile stress, elongation, hardness, reduction of area, and so on. Thermal properties, we are also aware: solidus, liquidus temperature, thermal expansion coefficient, and also those properties are not so complex to determine. But for the simulation tools, we need properties we are maybe not aware of, physical properties, the volume as a function of temperature in the solid and the liquid state, the density, the thermal conductivity, the thermal diffusivity, the viscosity, and also some chemical properties like Gibbs free energies, enthalpy, heat capacity. And these properties are much more difficult to determine with standard laboratory techniques, but simulation techniques can help us to find them if we have a good databases. And this example here shows some properties of standard sterling silver. So the black curve shows the volume fraction of the solid phase. And you see above 900 degrees, the sterling silver is liquid, the solid fraction is 0, and then it suddenly increases during the melting range. And if you look at the green, the red, and the blue curve, you can see that these curves show significant changes during the solidification. The volume is reduced. This is causing the shrinkage problems that we all know during casting. And we see the thermal conductivity increases. This is an important feature for the heat distribution during a casting process, for instance. And we can use these simulation tools to feed our simulation software, like for the casting simulation, for instance, with such parameters. And this is a very important input. Now we can also do the calculation of a solidus and the liquidus range, for instance. And this is an example I prepared for nickel-based alloys. These were alloys with up to 8 components based on nickel. And we wanted to vary the alloy compositions to find alloys with a suitable melting range, with a certain amount of phases. And so I used the high throughput calculation technique and calculated 20,000 alloy compositions. And this plot is showing the results. So you see that the solidus, the liquidus temperature, and the melting range are varying in a quite wide range. And with a set of filters, we narrowed down these 20,000 alloys to about 10 alloys that we found interesting for further characterization. And then we melted these 10 alloys, but we screened a much wider range, and this gives us a much better feeling how the system behaves and what is the role of the different alloying elements. Now, often simulation is not working as good as we would like to, because we are lacking of experimental data, because every simulation tool is usually based on experiments. So when we want to make experiments, it's good to also use screening methods, because doing one alloy after the other is a lot of time and a lot of money. But screening techniques are based on samples that show inside the sample there's a certain composition range. And within one sample, we can characterize many alloys without making 20, 50, hundreds of samples. And there are two techniques that I would like to show that are used. One is so-called diffusion couples. We all know colored jewelry with 2 or 3 different colors, like the wedding bands that are shown here. And these rings are usually bonded by diffusion bonding. So you put 2 metals into contact at high temperature with some pressure, and then some diffusion is taking place. The atoms are mixing in a very small zone, and this gives a stable bond of these 2 alloys. And we are doing just the same, and this is an example that we did on copper alloys. So you see these samples in the top image. There are 4 or 5 rings, and you can see from the color that these rings have different composition. And in the lower image, you see the cross-section. So you see the 4 rings, and in the center there is a cylinder. And these rings and the cylinder are bonded together by diffusion bonding. And then so that they're in intimate contact, and so that diffusion can take place. And by diffusion, the compositions of these different alloys are mixing. So in this diffusion zone, which is maybe 1 millimeter wide, we get a mixture of all the 3 alloys in this case at the contact point, and we get hundreds of compositions within a very small range. Now we have to measure these compositions, and we can do this in the electron microscope and by microhardness measurement. And this is what we done here. So you see the 3 different alloys from this example. You can see them here in 3 corners of this image. And the points that you're seeing here are hardness indents. And you can already see by eye that in some regions the hardness indents are larger. This means the alloy is softer, and in some regions they're smaller, so the alloys there are harder. Now we have to match the composition of the alloys with their hardness. And there are these 2 triangle diagrams. the left one is showing the hardness as a function of composition in the annealed condition. And the blue colors indicate that all the alloys are quite soft. Now in the right diagram, you can see that there are areas in red and yellow color. And this diagram was measured on the same sample, but after the sample has been annealed at 450 degrees for some hours. And then the so-called age hardening process is taking place. And we see that there are compositions that show high hardness while others still are staying soft. So with this method, we can screen a whole composition range and find alloys that have the potential for age hardening. With all these samples that are shown here, we have thousands of compositions that we can screen with a few samples. We can also get more information from these diffusion couples. So this diagram here, or pictures here, are showing on the upper left side the diffusion couple. So the 3 copper alloys, you can identify them from the different colors. And now just from the image, I can extract the color values, LA, B, and C, LA and B value. So I can match the composition with the color. I can also match the composition with the color after a corrosion test. I can do scratch testing. I can measure the electric conductivity. So there is much more than just looking for hardness. With such screening methods, we have a powerful technique to experimentally screen whole alloying systems. Another technique, this is a very old example I found from Jörg Fischer-Bühner's work. This is done, there is a diagram missing here. This was obtained by sputtering technique. So the picture here is showing a glass plate, maybe like 20 times 20 centimeter. And then we used sputtering technique to deposit alloying elements on this glass plate. And we used 3 different alloying elements: aluminium, indium, and gold. So they are arranged in a triangle. And so they're sputtering material from different sides. So we get mixtures of alloying elements on this glass plate. And now we can anneal this glass plate, and we find the blue and the purple color forming. So the lower image is in the annealed condition. And this also helps us to screen interesting composition ranges. And now we can use different mixtures of sputtering targets to determine the resulting color. But of course, we can also measure other properties like the hardness, electric conductivity, and so quite similar to the diffusion couple. But there are there's a difference between these two methods. With the sputtering technique, we map the area over a wide range, which makes it easy to characterize the properties. With the diffusion couple, everything is in a very narrow range, so we have to have very specific measurement techniques. So that's a benefit of the thin film coating. On the other hand, the thin films are just thin films, so they might behave different than a bulk material. And so with the diffusion samples, we are much closer to the bulk material. So ideally, we can use a combination of these two different techniques. Okay. Now, to finalize, the digitalization in material science is a trend at the moment. And you probably have heard about a digital twin or about ontologies. And so what does this mean? We have data from many different processes, from the casting processes, from the computer tomography, tensile tests, from metallographic images, hardness measurements, and so on. and also from simulation techniques. Now, all these different results are related, but the data are generated in different systems. And they are located on different computers, maybe on different network drives, and maybe you don't know where all these data are. And after half a year, you don't know maybe how you measure them. So you not only need the data, but you also need the metadata, the information about how your data were generated. And you have to link all these information. Now you can make big Excel sheets, and after 3 months, you forgot how you arranged the Excel sheet. So what is done is a so-called ontology is developed. An ontology is describing all these links. It's like a language. It says there is a machine that has an oven with a temperature that has 800 degrees and a time for 1 hour. And there is a sample that goes through this oven, this heat treatment process, and the sample has certain characteristics and has identifiers. And all this information is linked together. And so this is more than just a database. It also contains the link between the different processes. And this allows you an in-depth data analysis, much more than just sitting there and collecting your data and putting on paper. And you can find more complex relationships between the materials and the processes. This is something that is currently built up in pilot projects, and there are programs especially in Germany, but also in the European Union and many in the US that are looking for such development of such digital twins. And I think the jewelry industry, I'm not aware about projects in the jewelry on this topic. So I think this is something that is very interesting also to follow the process change and for the complete description, not only of the material or the process, but the complete description of the system. So with this, I would like to summarize. I showed you that alloy development is a complex work. There is a sheer number of alloying elements makes it very difficult to do all the work experimentally. So we have to use screening approaches based on simulation or experiments, or ideally a combination of both. And in the future, we should look for the development of such digital twins that allows us to describe the whole environment of production and use of our alloys. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. La memoria che verrà presentata adesso.
Now we're going to hear from Mr. Friso, an engineer. I apologize, says the speaker. We're going to hear from Fulvio Sinisi, who graduated in material sciences at the Padua University in 2016. He then was hired at LEGO. He's the R&D and technical support manager of the plating division unit. He deals with identifying solutions for electroplating, enhancement of the already existing project, and developing customized solutions. He always provides technical support to the marketing area of the plating division, devoting himself to different accounts worldwide. The title of his presentation is Steel in Jewelry, Superficial Treatment that are Nickel-Free. As of late, Steel has been used in jewelry, which is a more economic alternative to more precious alloys that are usually used for jewels. We're now going to be hearing about the state-of-the-art of electric deposition on steel, together with a case study on the optimization of electric deposition to reduce at best, if not eliminating, the nickel release by treated alloy containing steel. I'd like to remind you that we're going to take your questions at the end of the morning session, so please, you're kindly invited to fill up the forms that you've been given in the folder, where you can put down your questions, and the questions shall be addressed to the individual speakers by myself. So should you have any requests, feel free to voice your questions or to fill the form and let us know what your questions are. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. In today's presentation, we shall shed some light on stainless steel alloys, trying to understand what the main features are that led to the dissemination of this alloy even in the jewelry industry and for fashion accessories. We shall look at the analytic main feature of this alloy, despite the small content of nickels. Then we are going to have a look at the superficial treatment of stainless steel by means of electric deposition. And then we're going to look at the nickel-free electric deposition on stainless steel, looking at 3 case studies. Over the past few years, fast fashion has put forward a demand for high durability and low-cost jewels, so much so that new materials have been identified over and above precious metals for the production of fashion accessories and jewels, and this is the case for stainless steel and titanium-based alloys. The stainless steel jewels took up at the beginning of the 80s. The first industry is that are watches. Indeed, stainless steel is actually an alternative to the manufacturing of watches. The reasons why stainless steel has been used in the fashion industry and jewelry is connected to the low cost and availability of this material. Then it is highly durable, it has a scratch resistance, it has good resistance to corrosion, and it is easily found. Stainless steel is also recyclable. Finding the raw materials to develop stainless steel is not very complex, neither is it costly. Most stainless steel alloys do contain nickel, yet these alloys may be considered as nickel-free in that they don't elicit any allergic reaction. On the other side, we can also say that it is not to be considered an investment because the material is a low-cost material and you cannot obviously expect an increase in the value. Hardness could be considered as a disadvantage because they tend to be difficult to polish and to reshape it. On top of that, stainless steel alloys usually have a low chemical inertia, so much so that they can be easily attacked by chemical materials, by chlorides, seawater, or bleach, and other such materials can tarnish it. It does contain nickel, though in a very little percentage. So the stainless steel alloy is a special steel. It contains carbon and iron, carbon to a maximum of 2%. It is considered stainless when chromium is added in a percentage which shouldn't be higher than 10.5%. Chromium allows for an oxide being generated that actually makes the alloy self-passivating. So this coating, this layer of oxide, makes it less vulnerable to corrosion, and it is a barrier against the migration of the elements that are included in the alloy. Nickel, first and foremost. Nickel is actually included in all stainless steel with a percentage of up to 10%. It makes the alloy homogeneous, and it makes the alloy enjoy certain features such as resilience and flexibility. Other elements can be contained in lower percentages, not over 5%, granting certain additional features, for example, resistance to corrosion or hardness or other mechanical properties. There are stainless steel alloys that are nickel-free. Nickel is indeed replaced by manganese and nitrogen, but to date the performance are not satisfactory. The classification and the nomenclature of stainless steel is included in the UNI norm 188, which includes again the specifics for all the steel alloys. Actually, they can be classified based on the chemical composition or to the mechanical performance. When it comes to fashion and jewelry, steels are usually known based on their AISI coding system with a 5-digit and a letter. L, for example, stands for low carbon content as a feature of that alloy. Here you see the stainless steel alloys that are most widely used in jewelry and fashion. The ones that you see in bold letters account for some 90% of the production of fashion and jewel items. AISI 304 is the one that has a good property against corrosion. Then 316 is even better, but it costs more, and it includes more nickel. Nickel is a very important component in the alloy. Indeed, we know that allergy to nickel is one of the more easily found. Indeed, most people suffer from it. This is why there's a very strict regulation on the release of nickel through these nickel-containing alloys. So necklace and bracelets and rings should not include more than 0.5%. In the case of earrings, for example, the percentage of nickel should be even lower. So if the rules are complied with, so if the nickel percentage is lower than that set by the norms, you can actually talk about a nickel-safe object. And nickel tested implies that it is a super safe object that has been again tested. Sometimes you can also read nickel-free in the stainless steel alloy, and this is not totally true, because nickel-free should actually contain no nickel at all. But as a matter of fact, nickel-free may be used also for something that contains some nickel, and it is in fact nickel-safe in that no allergy is generated. The release of nickel by means of item of jewelry should comply with two regulations: 211 for jewelry and fashion items, and in eyewear there's another standard. In the case of any object with some superficial coating, and abrasion should be carried out to see what happens afterwards. The two regulations are different. And to measure the nickel release, artificial sweat is used on the surface. A test is performed between the object to be analyzed, the surface to be analyzed, and artificial sweat solution. With 2011, the object is totally included in the solution. In the case of eyewear, there's a band which is containing artificial sweat, which is connected to the item of eyewear. The test lasts for a week. The temperature is of some 30 degrees. At the end of the test, the nickel presence is detected. Stainless steel alloys, as listed here in this slide, can be considered as an allergic because the nickel release is compatible with the regulations. And we've been referring to the regulation, to the alloy as such. At times, this alloy is not enough. Additional treatment added on the surface to modify the properties, for example, the aesthetic properties, to change the color of the jewel or the fashion accessory, or to improve corrosion resistance. In the case of the fashion industry and jewelry, superficial treatment should exclude paints, especially so in the watches, because the outlook can be worsened. PUD is an acronym that stands for PVD stands for physical vapor deposition. It includes the evaporation and condensation of a solid source, which is often defined as target. There are many techniques to be used for PVD, depending on the type the metal is evaporated. In jewelry, usually it resorts to arc evaporation. An arc discharge is triggered between the target and the walls of the deposition chamber. Discharge with a current of the order of some 50 or 100 ampere is localized over a limited region of the target surface. There's also the sputtering can be used. A high-energy ion beam bombards the target, detaching atoms or molecules that move into the chamber and condense on the substrate. Both technologies include the transport and recondensation of the vapors emitted by the target. Nowadays, technologies include high energy ion that produce vaporization. This is called, again, ion plating technology, that allow for the transportation of vapor so as to make the development, the coating as homogeneous as possible. PVD includes a pre-treatment of the sample. As is the case of any electroplating, you have to do away with impurities so as to improve the adhesion of the vaporized materials on the substrate. So the sample is then placed on basket in the deposition chambers. The baskets are oriented so as to promote the adhesion of the coating. Vacuum is generated with pressure equal to 10 at -5 and 10 -7 millibar. The target is transformed into vapor, and the metals are then deposited on the substrate. Afterwards, the chamber is cooled down. With these systems, at times you can have reactions with the deposition of the metal together with gas, which is not inert but reactive, as in the case of nitrogen, oxygen, or acetylene. You might create on the substrate carbides of the metal included in the target. The temperature ranges between 100 and 1000 degrees, depending on the type of target, on the type of process required. And 3-6 micron per hour are then added on the substrate. This technology can only be used for certain materials, those that are extremely strong, such as tungsten, copper, and stainless steel. Deposition can also be performed on magnetic materials, ceramic and glass, but it is more difficult. Other materials, such as brass, alpaca, aluminum, and sinterized materials, require a pre-treatment. Oftentimes, electric deposition is resorted to before, in the case of low melting alloys, they cannot be treated with PVD treatment. In the case of zinc tin alloys, or those with a soldering, including some of the elements that I've just quoted. Coating by means of PVD includes titanium, zirconium, and chromium, which interacting with inert gas can create the pure metal, or there could be oxides and the carbides of the above-mentioned materials be generated. The colors that are usually resorted to in the jewelry and fashion industries are the ones that simulate gold, and those are obtained by means of deposition of titanium nitrides that look more like 24 karat gold. Carbon nitride are often used to obtain other colors different from the ones that you may obtain with other technology. For example, bluish coloring, or the famous rainbow effect that you see at the bottom of the slide on the left. PVD technology grants one major advantage in that depositions coating can be obtained that have a high resistance to corrosion and wear. It is a very slow process. You may control the deposition layer upon layer. And no toxic metals are used, so all the metals that are used are kind of green, but no nickel is ever included. Different colorings can be obtained that are quite specific to the use of this technology. No byproduct, no toxic byproduct is generated. This process can be used not on all materials. You cannot have large size manufacturing because you have to fill in the chamber, and it is a very time-consuming process. Usually electrodeposition develops micron by the minute, and this is a much slower process. With complex shapes and hollow items, this is very difficult to use. It requires very costly equipment, so you have to have important investments, and you have to train your staff. Electrodeposition is known to all and everybody. You can have a deposition of a metal of an alloy by means of an electrolytical process. As you see here in the slide, you have a generation of voltage using different potential. You can generate continuous currents, by means of which a number of chemical reactions are promoted with redox reaction, so that the metal ion included in the electrolytical solutions are deposited on an electrode, which is a cathode, i.e. the object to be coated. Oxidization is obtained at the anode. It could be an oxidization that involves also the melting of the anode in the case of soluble anode, as is the silvering process, silver deposition process. So you have metal and another substances that are used on the cathode. That is the object to be coated, and that grants specific features to the electrodeposition, either physical or aesthetic features. Electrodeposition is the technique which is more often used in the field of jewelry and fashion items. Indeed, any type of metal can be used, which is often required in the fashion and jewelry industries. You can combine different elements so as to fine-tuning the different coloring. So you can obtain light color gold or 24-karat gold, or you can have warmer colors or reddish colors, adding copper, for example, to the alloys. So to have a white coloring, you can use platinum, rhodium, and black can be obtained by means of electrodeposition of rhodium and ruthenium bound up with other chemical substances or blackening items that combine with the metal so as to obtain this black coloring. Electrodeposition has a number of advantages. It doesn't entail very high cost materials. This is a fast treatment, a micron per minute. Precious metals that are used can be recycled. Different metals can be used to obtain different colorings. You cannot have in situ deposition as with PVD process. The cost of the raw material is different, of course, depending on what you want to use. So one of the main defect is that chemical solutions are added, at times even poisonous substances such as cyanide. So the disposal of this material is kind of risky and difficult. Considering the advantages and disadvantages of the two technologies, PVD technology is considered being as the one which grants best compatibility with stainless steel. And it is actually the first option with stainless steel. This doesn't mean that you cannot have electrodeposition on stainless steel. The only limitation is that you have to dispose of the chromium oxide. With electrolytic deposition, you have to have conductive substances. The presence of an oxide is indeed an obstacle that can be solved by means of scratching the material and preparing the surface before the treatment. Usually different layer of nickels are used. And this is why, at the beginning, we tended not to resort to electrodeposition in the case of the fashion and jewelry industries, because nickel will be added, thus creating problems in terms of the release of nickel. Nickel-free cycles for stainless steel objects have been developed. You just have to remove the nickel deposition, usually replacing it with gold deposition. What is difficult is making sure that the analergic feature is maintained. When you scratch the chromium oxide on the surface, sometimes you also remove the barrier that you have in stainless steel, safeguarding the object from releasing nickel. So by means of nickel-free electrodeposition, you have to remake this barrier effect so as to contain the potential release of nickel. This is a project that we've carried out at LEGO, where electrodeposition was performed on screws to be used in eyewear using 316L stainless steels. The release is compatible with the rules. The same screw that was subjected to electrodeposition was releasing nickel 5 times more as included in the regulation. So the barrier was not sufficient. This is why subsequent studies were carried out within LEGO to develop nickel-free electrodeposition cycles whose objective was that of reducing the nickel release after electrodeposition. In this study, the request that had been put forward by a client in the eyewear industry was very complex. Within the same eye, within the same glasses, there were copper alloys and stainless steel, and basically you have to prepare the surface for that purpose. Before the project was carried out in Legor, the client was too much focused on copper. At the beginning of the cycle, nickel was used. Nickel wood, which is a chloride nickel, and then nickel deposition was often resorted to make the object resistant to corrosion. But the barrier effect, preventing the release of nickel after electric deposition, was only relying on the spray cycle. 12% of the production failed the test in terms of nickel release, and the samples with a smaller release were very close to the threshold limit, if not exceeding that limit. And those would be accepted because the regulation allows for higher percentages of nickel being released. It is not too restrictive. At Legor, our first study was a set of studies were carried out, analyzing 3 electrodeposition cycles. The activation of the surface was a common feature, and that was based on a treatment based on chlorhydric acid. In the first cycle, nickel wood was still used, whereas in the other 2 cycles, gold plating with an acidic layer was resorted to. The nickel was done away with. Then the final depositions were palladium nickel, 8020 alloy, which is a certified alloy, with nickel release that can play with the rules, well under the threshold limits, and a painting layer. In the first cycle, we wanted to make sure that the release of nickel was only due to the nickel layering, or if the underneath metal was releasing nickel. In the cycle 2, we use palladium. In cycle 3, we only use a nickel-free, and it was palladium iron that were used. Performing the release test, we saw that cycle 2 and 3 were granting best results. This meaning that nickel wood did contribute to the release of nickel. The cycle number 2 is the one that was tested because it was more similar to the cycle that we resorted to earlier on with palladium nickel. 100 samples, 100 item of eyewear was released. The treatment was carried out with chlorhydric acid because there was a bronze alloy. The frame of the spectacles were tested. The release test was approved with the problems of the customer being solved. The client basically was happy with our project. It has entrusted Legor with the identification of an electrodeposition process leading to thick layers, 5 micron of a precious metal electrodeposition. The initial cycle is the one that you see depicted here in the slide. Nickel was detected in the electrodeposition cycle. The surface was not activated at best. Another critical issue that you can see quite easily with this electron microscopy image showed that with this thick electrodeposition layers could cause problems, because adhesion between the different layers might be failing, or there could be cracks that might not be visible. Such cracks, therefore, can lead to the migration of nickel from the object to the wearer. The nickel included both in the stainless steel alloy and the releases in this case were unacceptable. Legor has come up with a proposal including 2 different cycles. These cycles have been developed in the manufacturing process. Nickel was totally done away with, so the adhesion with the surface had been obtained through a very acidic gold plating. Acidic copper was added, and the layers of precious metals have been carried out using, again, the gold plating. The gold plating has been done with 18-karat gold plating, for most of the gold being layered, and a 23-karat gold additional layer to make a more effective barrier, and an alkaline addition to get to the color that the customer was requesting. IEC 316 was used, and treatment has been used with chlorides and acidic substances. The test performed showed that the release amounts of nickel are well below the threshold limits, less than 0.5. Both the electrodeposition cycles were effective. Now we're using cycle 2 because they're the one that requires the least amount of 23-karat gold. In this last case study, the request that was put to us to a customer making bracelets asked us to support him in the electrodeposition of the spring with IEC 301 stainless steel. The main feature was that IEC 301 releases 1.4 micrograms, so the release was not compliant. This type of stainless steel basically was leading to too high a release. The client requested a 0.2, despite the regulation being more tolerant. And the precious metal shouldn't be bigger than 2 microns and shouldn't require any painting. 2 cycles have been tested in the lab. The activation of the surface was similar to the ones that we've seen earlier on, and the adhesion was promoted with the acidic gold plating. The new item is white bronze layering. These white bronze usually include a cyanide, and in the field of eyewear, they are not well tolerated. In this case, this is an accessory we're talking about, so we didn't have any problem using cyanide. The difference between cycle 1 and cycle 2 is that cycle 2 doesn't include acidic copper. White bronze was deposited on the gold layer. It is fully nickel-free. It is a palladium with iron. Acidic gold with 23-karat gold was used, adding an additional substance to obtain the color that was requested. With cycle 1, the release of nickel was below the threshold limit, and cycle 1 actually is a good solution. Cycle 2 yielded releases over the one that are tolerated. There was too thick a deposit. Probably the deposit was not correctly carried out after bronze. Probably there is a lack of compatibility in having white bronze on top of a gold plating that was fully acidic. Cycle 1 provided us with a good solution, and over the next few weeks, a beta test is going to be performed using, again, cycle 1. My presentation is over. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinisi, for your presentation. And the time has now come to listen to Mr. Andrea Friso. R&D and product manager of the business unit Master Alloy at Ligor. He has a consolidated experience in the metallurgy of precious metals and jewelry production processes. Mr. Friso coordinates the testing and the release on the market of new alloys, supporting the technical sales team all over the world. He will talk about the production of jewelry in binder jet additive manufacturing, our experience with steel, silver 925 and platinum 950. His presentation is focused on the use of the binder jet technology for the production of jewelry, starting from steel, silver, platinum powders. Specifically, the results will be shared that have been achieved in the Ligor laboratory, starting from 3D printing systems, binder jet AM systems, showing that this technology is a realistic possibility, although it still has to be perfected, in the world of additive manufacturing for the production of jewelry.
Grazie e buongiorno a tutti. Quella di oggi vuole essere la continuazione della prima presentazione.
Thank you very much. So this is the continuation of my presentation last year, when we evaluated the binder jet technology and compared it with other existing technologies. Today we're going to speak in a more detailed way with a short overview of the process, a short video, and then we'll talk about some of the most relevant parameters of the process for the successful printing and sintering with the binder jet. We will then see the results, the present results of our studies on different materials covered during these 2 years, since we worked on different types of steel, silver 925 and platinum 950. I would like to start with a video that will quickly show you the process. It's additive manufacturing, so you start from a 3D drawing. We use file step that are downloaded through a software to allow for the appropriate sintering. The design feeds the printer that you can see here, and the powder is uploaded. So the metal powder that is used for the printing process. The build unit is brought. It is a tray containing the printing floor that goes down on the Z-axis progressively as printing takes place. This is the plate on which a roller deposits the binder contents, which are then sprayed and that are used to create planes, bidimensional growing planes on the Z-axis. This is like a 2D printer, where I have the ink on one single plane, but here we have a 3D development. The build unit is then cured. That is, the binder has to be treated to guarantee mechanical resistance. And then the pieces are extracted at the moment manually. After having been cured, they are sufficiently resistant to be manipulated. They're placed on trays and are then submitted to heat treatment to achieve the sintering process. The item is now ready to be placed in the oven. The oven is loaded with the trays, and the items will remain in this chamber characterized by high thermal stability. So the heat cycle in every phase has a very low degree of variation in the different areas of the chamber. And this is fundamental to obtain dense, stable, and homogeneous items. So in 1 second, I've actually shown you how it works, even though I haven't told you anything about the process yet. These 3 slides simply summarize what I've just shown you. So deposition of the powder, deposition of the binder in a selective way depending on the design of the item, where you need the structuring of the powder. Evaporation, that's a first phase to give mechanical resistance, which takes place directly in the printer. It's proprietary technology. Then the powder is cured, the item is extracted, and following sinterization, we have the cooling cycle. Let's have a look at some of the most relevant parameters in the BJT process so that we can better understand how it works conceptually. We're talking about metals, therefore we start from an alloy. The type of alloy defines the characteristics of the material. And then we have some specific parameters of the process, such as the drawing, the design, the printing, the preparation for sintering, and sintering as such. Initially, we wanted to include finishing, but that actually depends on the good success of sintering, so we do not have any specific aspects, maybe the roughness of the item immediately after sinterization, that we view as peculiar to this technology. So let's have a look at the critical parameters related to the alloy. Well, the heat characteristics of the alloy are fundamental because they define the sintering temperature. The type of alloy also defines the possibility of eutectic low melting phases that could compete with a medium low temperature phase for the elimination of the binder. In a while I will show you some examples. And then of course the reactivity of the material that defines the number of atmosphere within which I can work during the debinding and the sintering phase. Granulometry. There is a trade-off between the yield of the powder. We have perfectly controlled atomization phases, but I have to take into consideration a phase which would cost a lot if you're using precious material, and the optimum grain size, which according to the literature is very, very low in binder processes. So you need to select whenever possible an alloy that gives you a good production yield in terms of the powder, and the need, especially for jewelry and fashion, requiring a density equal or close to 1. Design and drawing. One of the most important aspects of binder jet technology is that in all intermediate phases prior to sinterization, I have an aggregate of metal powder and binder. A polymeric binder that is used in a much smaller quantity compared to other additive technologies such as MIM. Here we have approximately 1% of the weight of the material. I still have to consider the shrinkage in time due to the fact that my initial item has a certain size during the drawing and designing phase, that must be bigger due to the fact that there is the binder as well. And the z-axis shows a product, an item, which is 15% larger when I'm printing it compared to the final item on the XY plane, and 17% on average on the z-axis, which is the axis on which the binder is deposited. So if the object has been perfectly sinterized, these parameters are independent of the type of alloy. So the size monitoring in terms of size prior and after sintering in steel, platinum, and silver is an independent value, at least if we consider powders that have been atomized in inert gas. This is the ideal case, so once you decide the size, I can proceed with the production. But on top of that, you have to think about the possible softening of the piece and the presence of gravity, which plays a role also during sintering. This means that if the item has not been adequately placed in the sintering oven, could be distorted by gravity, or the shrinkage in area close to parts that have a bigger mass could actually be strained in an irregular way, leading to undesired distortion. To tackle this problem, during the design phase, it is possible to produce supports. You can see on the left the green and two sintered objects in steel, which during printing have been printed just as they were, without that brick that you can see here, which is made of aluminum. The green one, in the green one, the powder supports the object while it is growing, so there is no mechanical issue here. But if I'm sintering the item, or when I'm sintering the item, unless I use a support, of course you can place the brick also in a different way, but here it acts like a bridge. And it shows the bridge that you see in the item on the right indicates the distortion caused by gravity. So the solution could be placing this brick and consider the tolerance of the object after sintering, so that the object can be supported rather than caving in, and giving me the possibility to extract the brick after sintering. In other cases, it is possible to co-produce both the item and the support. This has a meaning when we're talking about non-precious materials, but it becomes much more costly if you're using silver or other precious materials. Well, here the shrinkage phase that takes place during sintering allows me to have both the support and the item devoid of any tension that could take place when I have a base that has a certain friction, and therefore prevents the upper part of the item to slide, causing tension at the base that could also lead to distortions. So these are two amongst the many tricks that allow you to obtain complex forms, bearing in mind the thermal phase of the alloy. On your left in green, you can see another support. This is for a watch box. This is AIS 1316L. And in this way, we can guarantee excellent tolerance in terms of the circular shape of the item. The very same item produced without the support showed a distortion with a tapering between the base and the upper part of the object. This is another example. Here you can see the different tolerances. We're talking about items with size base less than 8 times 8 centimeters and 7 centimeters in height. Possible tolerance range goes from 0.05 and 0.15 millimeters, depending on the geometry of the item and depending on all the other aspects. The shrinkage on the XY planes can be stabilized, allowing us to achieve items with reasonable tolerances. These are lengths of a watch bracelet. The printing phase is the most important one. We have two systems in-house, an HP printer and a desktop metal printer. They have been chosen predominantly because of the size of their printing chamber. The HP machine has a printing volume which is pretty significant, about 19 liters. We can use significant quantities of powder suitable for series production. The HP printer was also the first one we started using with steel, non-precious metals to explore the technology. When full loaded, it can contain 200 kilograms of steel. And you cannot think of processing, like we started last year, precious metals in such a big chamber. Because, of course, you have to cover it all up on the Z-axis. So we have decided to make use of another printer, which can contain about 1 liter. 10 times 4 centimeters is a printing capacity, and it allows us to work with approximately 30 kilograms of platinum powder. Two similar technologies, each one with its own peculiarities, that discriminate between the use of precious and non-precious metals. Our experience with the different printers tells us that depending on the type of material, on the granulometry, and the printer that we're using, it is necessary to have a learning curve, which is specific for that given setup. So after tests have been concluded, we can say that the printing phase is not the most complex one of the whole process, because the heat phase, the debinding and sintering phase, is much more surprising and has required many more interactions to achieve satisfactory results. The interesting aspect of the printing phase is that you compare it with XML. In binder jet, the speed of printing depends on the speed with which the head printing or the binder deposition head is moved. And this is independent. Whether I have a punctiform object or whether I have hypothetically to cover the whole printing area. With XLM, the work on the layer is directly dependent on the number of pixels that I need to cover. So this is actually in favor of the binder jet print because it is much faster, at least during the printing phase. Printing time, therefore, depends on the total height of the item and not so much on the area of each slice. It is interesting to focus on the layout of the items, making use or opting for the plane of the biggest encumbrance of the item to guarantee support in terms of gravity. Items have to be placed a few millimeters one away from the other, so you can actually fill the surface quite well. Trivial as it may sound, the higher the resolution, the better for the jewelry world. With our powders, the roughness you obtain at the end of the printing process is approximately 4 microns on the XY planes. It is higher on the Z-axis, about twice as much. And this depends, of course, on the binder elimination phase. The binder. Well, the binder is a polymeric compound owned by the companies selling printers, and it guarantees the innermost adhesion of the powder particles during all low temperature phases. So it allows me to decide what is going to become an item and what is going to be reusable powder. The powder that remains in the machine is immediately ready for a second printing cycle. And the resistance of the green item depends on the quantity of binder. Hypothetically, I can also work with areas devoid of binder, because maybe they're protected by an outer shell. And the advantage is increased densification. The number one enemy of good densification is the possible presence of binder that has not been eliminated, that did not evaporate, that did not evacuate. I have to guarantee a certain mechanical resistance, therefore, mechanical strength. So for the processing phases, I have to be on the safe side, and I need to guarantee, thanks to the binder, for the whole section of the item, a minimal strength. One of the challenges we have today is that the binders that are present on the market are boiled down to one binder, in the sense that they promise to us to develop binders depending on the temperature and on the material, but the ones that work best have been optimized for high temperatures. And this leads to possible complexities for, say, copper-based materials or silver and gold materials. The curing phase, which you saw before, during which the item is introduced in a chamber after being printed, envisages an intermediate temperature between 120 and 180 for 3 to 5 hours, depending on the quantity of powder that has to be cured. And it has to bear in mind that some materials might be reactive. This is the case of silver and bronze. Therefore, the curing process for these metals, which is carried out in air, could lead to tarnishing, to oxidation. And oxidation may be detrimental to the sintering phase. I don't want to bore you too much talking about sintering. Let's just remember that this process makes use of thermal energy, so increased temperature, heat that is released into the system, so that a compound of non-aggregated powders that are kept together by the binder is transformed through adhesion between the different grains of powder. This process is called necking and starts at a much lower temperature compared to the actual melting of the material and the sintering temperature. But this is the beginning of the densification process. So there are mechanisms of surface diffusion that allow us to obtain a meniscus which spreads then in the spaces in the powder, and then as the temperature is further increased, there are some mechanisms in the powder particle that allow for the approximation of the centers of the powder grains so that densification can occur, with the final target of achieving a residual porosity equal to 0 or very, very close to it. Very low. That is less than 0.5. For aesthetic purposes, 0.4, 0.3, bearing in mind the distribution of powders, because we're talking about an average value which is measured in a certain area, but of course the dimension of some pores could be different. There may not be homogeneity. So the mechanism, the two competing mechanisms in the debinding area, that is the first part of the cycle at high temperature of the sintering process, derive from the fact that for some alloys, for some powders, the debinding process takes place at much lower temperatures compared to the beginning of powder aggregation. This is the case of AZ1316, where the necking temperature is 950 degrees, whereas the binder evacuation temperature, which lasts several hours and takes place at 400 degrees, is not competing against the first phase. For silver, these two mechanisms compete one against the other, because for silver, and this is our practical experience, necking starts much before the temperature of 400 degrees is achieved. So this prevents us from having a simple heat cycle without having to pay special attention to the different temperatures required. So this is a problem that still has to be totally resolved, and that requires, or could at least be supported, by specific binders for low temperatures. On top of that, there are windows of excellent sinterizability that depend on the nature of the alloy. In some cases, they're pretty wide. This is the case of steel. In other cases, they're very narrow, for bronze, for instance, for which the excellent sintering temperature window is very narrow, leading to undesirable results, so that in the lower part, I do not have a good sintering and no mechanical resistance. If I get very close to the solidus temperature, there is the risk of significant distortions. After curing and debinding, the true sintering process starts. That envisages specific atmosphere depending on the type of alloy, depending on the type of material. Sintering ovens that are compatible for MIM, where the binder content is still pretty significant when the item is placed in the oven, envisages the use of reducing atmospheres with partial or total pressure, hydrogen, or the possibility of insufflating during some parts of the cycle inertizing gas like nitrogen. For platinum, we have used an oven that uses air, since platinum has some highly desirable features, the very high temperature and the very strong oxygen inertia. Therefore, that high temperature allows me to work easily and eliminate the binder. Vacuum is not advised for sintering because it prevents heat homogeneity in the chamber, which is fundamental to guarantee that all items inside the chamber on the different trays are correctly treated, heat treated. This is the standard sintering cycle for stainless steel. We have phase 1, the binding, which has been extended significantly because of the shape of these items. This is similar to the cycle of microfusion with chalk. In the case of investment customing, we got wax. Here we got the binder, so it's a different thing. And then we have the curve that represents a sintering phase. And the phase of densification takes place in the upper part of the curve, so about 1400 degrees. If the item doesn't have any specific problems, the cooling curve can be the one that you can see here, and then fast cooling can continue. So the cycle usually has a duration of 23 hours for steel. It is a pretty long cycle. Therefore, we usually take into consideration 48 hours because the printing phase has a duration of 2 to 4 hours. Then we have the curing phase and the sintering phase that are usually carried out overnight and that are much more time-consuming. Finishing. The binder jet technique deposits powder, and we can generally check the process by analyzing cross-sections. This gives us an idea of how well the item has been produced. And this is the list of the materials that we have treated. The first one was steel, AISI 316, with excellent results. We believe that this now is mature, and it has a pretty wide sintering window. Powder granulometry, as initially suggested by the supplier. Well, this steel has the characteristics that are desired. The presence of nickel as such can be a limiting factor in some markets, but the softness and the mechanical resistance, which is not all that high, could actually play a role. We have also investigated steel panacea, which is a nickel-free, much harder steel used in fashion. It has been used, although it has very special characteristics in terms of the risk of obtaining, after sintering, the precipitation in a ferritic phase with very low electrochemical resistance and significant issues of corrosion, which would mean worsening the aesthetic characteristics. The sintered item can be treated to sort out the problem of corrosion, 1,100 degrees for 2 hours in nitrogen. But of course, this is costly because it has to be carried out in other companies. So we're now working on a treatment that then can take place during the sintering phase through the insufflation of nitrogen. And this has already significantly reduced the problem, although we cannot say that the result is excellent yet. We have also used a hard steel. It is a nickel-based steel, 17.4 pH. This has been our working bench for powders that have been produced with water atomization. There were no problem during the printing phase, with the exception of a more marked shrinkage on the Z plane, something we still have to sort out. Silver has been the first precious material we have worked on. So we started on the metal. because we're starting with sterling silver at the beginning, but the eutectic phase, which is marked in the binary alloy, represented a problem for densification. So this is why we changed the formulation to minimize the problem. And final residual porosity now is less than 1%. So in some cases, the result is much better than the 0.9 of residual porosity, but it still depends on the morphology of the item. So we still have to work on this alloy. We still have to fine-tune it to be able to say, yes, it perfectly meets the needs of the jewelry industry. Another example. This has been easy from the very beginning. Platinum 950. Since last October, we have started printing with this material, which is perfect from many viewpoints. Excellent heat resistance. The sintering phase does not cause any specific problems in terms of the heat level that needs to be reached. The debinding and necking temperatures are based on two mechanisms that are non-competitive. So from the very first printing experiment, we achieved a residual porosity less than 0.5%. So dense items have been obtained with a powder that was slightly coarser than described in the literature, which had 20 micron. So we can actually think about using this powder also to produce products to be sold on the market. So to conclude, steel and platinum high melting alloys can be viewed as mature to be used for jewelry, watches, and fashion. They're stable, functional, and they can be submitted to serial tests for later production of larger quantities with the MIM technology. So BJT is not an alternative to MIM, but the possibility of working without using a die of thousands and thousands of euro is a good advantage. The challenging side, however, is still related to alloys of gold and silver. For silver, we have made some progress, and this year we're going to study gold as well. We're going to investigate gold. So these are two aspects that will characterize our work in the new year. And our targets are making use of these powders with this technology and analyzing the technical features as we have done for the other alloys already. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Leger team, and thank you very much to all of you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Friso. And now the last presentation of this morning. There will be a Q&A session at the end. And I kindly ask you to submit your questions by writing them on the papers that you have been given. Now, the last presentation is by Valerio Doppio, R&D Manager of ProGold. He got a degree at the Padua University and another degree in journalism at the University of Ferrara. He mainly deals with research and development, and he also carries out quality tests. And the paper is entitled The Use of EDXRF Technology to Measure Gold after the introduction of ISO 23345. And he will talk about the use of this technology in the gold sector. The correct calibration, the selection of parameters, and the understanding of the structure of jewels make it possible to have very accurate results in line with the new standards of ISO 23345 2021. Please, Mr. Doppio.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning and welcome, and thank you for being here. I'd like to start my presentation with a short introduction related to the process of coupling and then the process of XR estimate. Well, you certainly know this fire assay technique, which is recognized at an international level, and it is used for the determination of the fineness of gold. Well, this technique, however, has some limitations because many of the steps are made by hand by operators, and so there is the risk for mistakes. And often there are differences in terms of results depending on the operator which carries out the test. In some big companies, for example, the operators have a specific patent which monitors their work. Now, the X-ray technique has slightly different characteristics. It is not destructive, which is an advantage as compared to fire assay. It does not require chemical reactors or furnaces. It is very fast and it is practically carried out by the machine, and so the work is not really carried out by human operators. Of course, there are also limits in the use of this technique, and in particular, we will see that calibration of the instrument is extremely important. Well, this technique is based on the excitation of atoms, and so it can be prone to mistakes if the surface and the bulk of the sample are not perfectly homogeneous. And it has only recently been introduced in our sector, so we don't have many data available. Well, we should have a short video about the technique and how it works. I'll try to be very simple. So there is a high energy source which generates a beam of radiation that is focused on the sample, and within the sample that causes the emission of electrons from the inner shells. And when the external shells atoms occupy these spaces, these vacancies, irradiation is emitted, which is not generical, but is specific of that electronic transition, so specific of that atom. Now, if we want to measure those outgoing signals, well, we can identify the atoms in the sample and also their relative quantity. And so we have both a qualitative and a quantitative analysis. And so you see the final step in the video. So the technique lends itself to the interpretation of the composition of the sample. Well, what's interesting for us in the jewelry sector is the content of gold, of course. So what has changed recently? Well, recently, the Technical Committee 74 of the International Organization of Standards, that is ISO, has produced a new document, 23345, which is specific for the analysis of the fineness of the jewel by using the XR technique. And our work started off from the publication of this document. So we decided to assess the results achieved during the drawing up of that document. We wanted to see whether we could improve those results and also to see what are the specificities of this type of technique. So we will see now the influence of the collimator. That is the collimator dimension, and whether this is influenced also by the alloy microstructure, because we know that the structure can vary depending on the solidification phases or the contents of some other elements. And then specifically, we will see what is the influence of calibration of matrix elements. And we will make an analysis of the accuracy levels that you achieve in terms of the fineness. And then we will also see the influence of the matrix that is based on the calibration made and the compositions that we try to measure. We will see how the performance changes and whether there are differences. And then we will also see some practical tests in some gold assays provided to us by a partner company, so that we can say that we didn't work only on laboratory samples, but also on real finished products. And we will see whether the results of our study can be applied to actually produced samples. Now, this is the experimental setup that we used for these measurements. Well, we neglected some measurements because they had already been explored in technical terms. So in the literature, you can find papers dating back to 2006 related to the parameters of these tests. So let's start from the first point, which is of interest of us, which is the size of the collimator. I skip a bit of maths. Why is it so important? Why is the dimension so important? Let's make an example. On the left, you see a sample which is analyzed by XR. These are two sections, two examples of the section of material whose signal is involved in the analysis based on X-rays. If we do a fire assay, we will cover the whole sample. Now, if we use the Lambert-Beer equation, what we achieve is this. And if we use a smaller collimator, which is on the left, the fire assay will involve 655 more atoms than the XRF analysis. But if we increase the size of the collimator, this ratio will go down dramatically, down to 59 times. And this suggests that the bigger the collimator and the more the quantity of atoms is similar to the technique used for fire assay. Now, let's have a look at another point, the surface, which also, and the microstructure of the surface, which can have an influence at the time of when we choose the collimator. Here we see three surfaces, small grains, medium grains, large grains. That is a sort of natural grain. This is a collimator. And this is 0.6 millimeters. Well, it's clear that for a small grain, a small collimator will have a certain idea about the grains included in the material. But in a larger surface, we will limit the capacity to detect the number of grains involved in the analysis. In order to check whether this mathematical consideration and also this surface-related consideration are actually affected, we carried out repeated analysis, repeated tests, and these are the results. As you can see, well, the fineness are below, but apart from the fineness, please focus on standard deviations. While in the case of small grains and large grains, the standard measurements were good, both in the case of big collimators and small collimators. In the case of medium grains, standard deviations double as compared to previous case series. Okay. Based on these results, we can conclude that it is better to use the biggest possible collimator, of course, if that is compatible with the sample. And we should pay attention, be particularly careful if our alloy has a large grain or dishomogeneous grains, because this can affect the analysis. Now, let's move to the second element that we have analyzed, that is the effect of calibration. We decided to have three different alloys, 3N yellow gold, 5N red gold alloy, and palladium white gold alloy. And this in order to have a representation both of gold, white, and red gold, and to see how these behaved. And for each of the three alloys, we built a calibration curve using three samples, 75, 76, and 77%, so as to calibrate the surrounding area of these samples. And then we wanted to focus on one specific element, zinc. Why zinc? Because if we look at the absorption spectrum, we see that there is a partial overlapping of zinc with one of the secondary peaks of gold, something that does not happen with other elements such as palladium and copper. So there could be an interference between zinc and gold. And for that reason, we decided to carry out a series of analyses where we checked what happened if we declared to the instrument that zinc was present in the same quantity as it is normally present in these alloys, or if we ignored and did not declare the presence of zinc, thus avoiding that the machine would force the content of zincs. And results can be seen here in this diagram. As you can see, not declaring zinc within calibration apparently improves results. And this is an instrumental limitation of the way in which curves are interconnected, because the machine receives an instruction by the operator to consider the zinc, and so the machine overestimates the presence of zinc. So we explored zinc, but if you use other elements, such as gallium, indium, and all the other elements that you can use in gold alloys, well, you will have to evaluate what is the effect of these secondary elements. Now, let's have a look at the results after making calibration, choosing these parameters on the three alloys that I mentioned earlier. Gold alloy, where we wanted to see whether there was a difference between the fine grain microstructure and the large grain microstructure. And these are the results that we achieved, and that are summarized in these two slides. And then we also did fire rate assay. So you see that there are slight differences in terms of fineness, both with fire assay and with X-rays, which are probably due to the fact that in order to obtain large grains structure, we used a different production method. But if we compare the results between the X-ray analysis and the fire assay in fine grain and large grain alone, well, we see that mistakes are not so different, and they are lower than half mm. Only in the case of large grain, medium grains, the number increases slightly due to surface dishomogeneity. And we will see that this is not present in other colors. Now, if we look at the same set of analyses for red gold, these are the results. A compatibility of the results between fire assay and X-rays, and some comparable mistakes, and in both cases below half mm. Again, we see the values, and after making our tests again, this is what we achieve. So, correspondence between X-ray analysis and fire assay within the limits of measurement errors. And please consider that the fire race regulation establishes that when you do repeated tests, values are acceptable if the difference is within half mm. So we're very close to the results that have already been achieved. So we could also think that the results in this case are even better. And the limit of fire assay for palladium is that palladium doesn't dissolve so easily, and so you have to take that into consideration. Here you see a diagram of what I just said, and you see that apart from the first case of yellow gold, there is always a good correspondence between the fineness achieved with the fire assay and with X-ray. So the performance of this technique for the alloys considered and for these measurements is very good. Now, let's have a look at other parameters. What happens, for example, if instead of using a calibrated method for a specific composition, I want to measure the fineness of gold of another alloy? I'll make an example. And we crossed some data. We took the red gold, and we used the same method that we had used for the yellow gold, and that in order to measure the importance and the influence of matrix. And we see it here. Basically, there is a wide error if we use the white gold method with red and yellow gold alloys, and vice versa, because there is an element which is completely different, and which is palladium, which causes variations in terms of results. And there are also variations between gold, yellow gold and red gold, which have the same composition. So basically, we shouldn't use methods for different colors, but if we concentrate on just one color, so let's take our red alloy, and instead of analyzing it with its specific method, we can use methods for other red gold alloys with a higher copper percentage. And this is the result that we achieve. Above, you see the original measure, the calibrated method. It's in the red circle. And below, you see the results achieved by other methods. You see that in the case of alternative methods, where we have a composition which is pretty similar, and with a large quantity of copper, we have good results, although they are not perfectly in line with the results achieved with the specific test. While as we go towards pink or yellow gold, we will find those big differences that we had found in the previous test. So what can we deduce? That for small deviations from the real value, we have results which are in line with the previous ones, while as compositions differ, our results will worsen gradually. We still have to establish whether there is a lower limit which requires a more systematic test. That is, what can be the difference between the compositions used, and that in order not to excessively affect the results. Now, this is the last part of our research work, and it is a case study on two different samples. We chose two lines of products. It's important because these two products are produced with completely different techniques. One is produced by mechanical working and the other by investment casting. So this is the experimental setup that we used in the light of all the results obtained previously. You will note the dimension of the collimator, which is 0.6 millimeters. It is the biggest collimators that we could use on these specific objects. Now, let's start from this ring. With the addition of the results obtained previously, while in orange you see the results of the fire assay on the various types of the ring, and in blue you see the results of the X-ray technique. And this is investment casting produced. And we see that in almost all cases there is a compatibility between the results obtained with the two techniques, with the exception of 3 cases where there is a difference between the two fineness, although it does not go beyond 1.2. Well, this is an investment casting product which, in case of cold, etc., actually has some lack of homogeneity, and so it can be affected by the fact that XRF is a surface technique. Now, if we look at another type of product, this is what we achieve. That is perfect compatibility between the two results. So, in conclusion, what is the result of our work? Well, calibration methods are fundamental in order to guarantee the accuracy of the measurement by means of X-ray. And as you could see in the previous slide, it is indispensable that the method used for the analysis has been calibrated based on an alloy which is as close as possible to the object that we want to test, because even if the deviations are very small, well, they can have an impact on the fineness, on the evaluation of the object. We've seen that zinc can have an impact on the performance of the measurement, and so we need to consider the effects of these elements on the performance of the instrument. And then we have seen that we have to use the biggest possible collimator in order to maximize the statistics about the atoms measured, and then we have to look at the homogeneity of the microstructure. And then we have seen that the X-ray analysis can, in some alloys and under some conditions, can be comparable in terms of performance with the fire assay. Well, this doesn't mean that we ask you to move from fire assay to X-rays, because both these techniques have their weak points and their strong points. But the X-ray technique makes very fast analysis and does not destroy the samples. Well, it could be a good basis for a wider exploration of the pieces of production without focusing on the model sample and enabling us to test all the objects of production, and then to make a fire assay only for those elements where we think that there are some criticalities. Clearly, in the next few years, we will have to further investigate the performance and the possibilities of these instruments which are spreading, and more performing models and more accurate models are being produced, and the ISO regulation is pretty young, so to say. There is the possibility of improving it so that we can use this technique widely within the sector. With that, I conclude, and I thank you for your attention.
Siamo un po' in ritardo, comunque chiedo ai relatori.
We're a bit late. I'd like to invite all the speakers to join me here on stage to take the questions if they have any. Thank you.
Che le prime due
The first two speakers left. Should you have questions for them, let me have them, and we shall forward. Microphones are available. Should you need one?
qualche se c'è qualcuno del pubblico eventualmente che deve prima leggiamo quelle che sono arrivate.
So we're going to listen to the questions that have been sent. So far, the mic is off.
first question is very good presentation. Thank you very much, Jörg. I really do not get the point. What is the benefit of coated stainless steel over coated bronze, alpaca, or monel? Now, the benefit of stainless steel really is obviously in the non-coated state, but most of your presentation was about fighting with the disadvantages related to the presence of removing the passivating chromium layer when trying to coat stainless steel. Okay. Mainly the reason is for aesthetical purposes. For example, in a sample like the eyewear, the eyewear is based on different alloys. So I need alpaca, I need brass, I need also stainless steel for mechanical reasons. Usually the sides are made with stainless steel because they are flexible. And the other objects are made with maybe low prices alloys or alloys which are can be melt in a simple way. I'm not an expert in alloys, of course. So I need to make homogeneous the coating. So I need a coating on top to make the surface homogeneous. First, for aesthetical purposes. The reason of corrosion is correct, but the problem is that if I need to have stainless steel, I have to keep stainless steel as it is, so white, gray alloy. Usually, if I want an aspect which is more bright or more luminous, I need to perform coating on top. So the reason is mainly aesthetically. Of course, when I put a coating on top, especially galvanic coating, I have to do the removal of the oxide layer. And when I remove the oxide, I have the problem of nickel migration on top. So this is the reason, aesthetical. In fact, during the presentation, I showed that when the color is accepted, it's better to use PVD on inox steel, on stainless steel, sorry, because this does not affect the chromium layer. That's the point. Sorry if my question is very stupid, which most probably is the case, because I tried to follow your presentation without online translation. Okay, online translation. Okay, I understand. No, I hope you get the point. Okay.
So I've got some questions and comments from Jörg Fischer-Bühner as well. Number one, very good and highly interesting, relevant paper. Thank you. Comment two, I just want to confirm the power of high throughput computer simulation analysis for alloy development. Indoterm has had the pleasure to join at least one cooperative R&D project of FEM with highly powerful results, impossible to arrive at with other approaches. So, thank you again. And now there is a critical comment. Not sure if I should thank you for referring to my earlier work. So the colored gold work was done by Jörg 17 years ago. And I had the pleasure to take over that project when I started. Using co-sputtering for high throughput experimentation. I used to be very proud those days about the idea to use it for alloy development of new color, gold alloys. The results were completely useless, at least for the traditional jewelry fabrication. We discovered new colors in the ternary system of gold, aluminium, indium, which were stable only in the deposited state, impossible to obtain by melting and casting. Although the new alloys were also observed in the annealed state after co-sputtering. Probably this is all related to the strange peculiarity that's too peculiar for me, of intermetallic systems. Well, that's a very good comment because it shows that the PVD technique produces samples that are far away from thermal equilibrium. And there are other works that confirm that the color of, especially of these intermetallic phases, is not present after deposition, but it needs an annealing step for the atoms to arrange so the color is formed. So this was observed by other researchers as well. And but annealing the alloy or this plate is challenging because the layer is quite thin and there might be thermal stresses that cause the layer to detach, and then it rolls up and the sample is not useless. It's useless. So there are some tricks and challenges in this technique. But it has been proved by other people that it can be very useful for alloy development. Maybe not for finding the right colors, but for other purposes. So yeah, it requires some experimentation with this technique. Thank you.
Ci sono altre domande da parte?
Are there any other questions from the audience? Could you please come to the microphone, or the microphone is going to be given to you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, actually. Thank you for the wonderful papers you share. I'd like to address my question to Valerio. What happens if we are not familiar with the composition of the sample? Is there a possibility to have a reliable result based on the result of different calibrations? Thank you.
Yeah, I will try to speak in English. So he was asking if you don't know the composition of the sample, if you are able to still obtain a measurement of the value of the gold fineness by combining the result coming from different calibration methods used with that composition. For what we have experimented up until now, I will say the answer is negative. We do not seems to have a way of triangulate, basically, which is what you are asking, the right fineness based on the results of different methods. The starting point is always understanding the basic composition and then starting do a calibration based on that composition. The matrix effect seems to be too strong. You can ignore trace elements, but minor elements we are still investigating, and major elements you have to know to do the calibration.
Sono altre domande?
Any other question? Okay, thank you so much to the speakers for this beautiful and interesting session. I think there is a light lunch outside. We resume at 2:30 instead of 2 o'clock. Thank you.